Well, I wasn't planning to shoot a video on this thing. This is the 4th out of 3 I've already done, but let me, so I'm not really prepared to shoot this video, but let me show you what's going on here. Get the front here. B&O S80, alright? And take note of the little overload light. Alright, now this one, there's a big clunky sound rattling around in the box, and usually when I hear that I think, well, an inductor's broken off of the crossover board. And sure enough, it was the big inductor, the one on the woofer, had broken off the crossover board. So this is how it's set up. I've already replaced the foam suspension on the woofer and put it back in, and then I want to show you this because this is strange. Look how the iron core inductors, there's 2 of them, and look how the iron cores are punched all the way through the board, and then there's glue around there and glue underneath on the other side. This is some glue I've added that hasn't dried yet, that's why it looks like that. But I found the inductor rolling around the box, and of course it had broken off the leads. But the glue holding the inductor on didn't fail. The actual metal, the iron component in the inductor sheared off at the board. It actually broke. This ferrous material here actually broke. So I've epoxied it back together, and I've added some more adhesive onto these other ones to try to prevent that. So that was an unusual. I've never seen an iron core inductor where the core itself sheared off. In fact, I've never seen one that was punched all the way through the PC board like that. Another thing happened. I put another one of these back together, and when I tested it at first, everything before I did the foam, it was all good. And then when I put it back together, I have you know, a short at the output. I opened it back up, and I found one of the leads on this little LED here had broken off, and I had to replace that, and that prevented the entire speaker from working. So then we get this one put back together, and we don't have any mid-range at all. But I come to my mid and my tweeter hookups, and I'm showing around 7 ohms on both of them. And I'm looking, going, look, I'm showing 7 ohms here, what's going on? So we open this up. Alright, the tweeter, it just sits in this slot in this molded front here. See, there's no mounting screws of any type. So the tweeter sits in there, and then the mid sits here. And these flanges here, when you put this back together, they just push down on it and hold the whole thing together. This is some bizarre engineering here, so maybe somebody was having a weird day. But the molded front, obviously, and we can't use any other kind of mid-range here. It's all molded together. So the mid-range that was in there looks like was probably originally a Seos part, or ScanSpeak, or let's see, H, that would be a Seos, S-E-A-S. Some people pronounce it C's. I call it Seos. So there's no mounting flange. There's no mounting flange at all. It just drops in and pressure fits when you put the sub enclosure back on it. This reminds me a little bit of KEF engineering. So anyway, we're showing well, here's the flange. Alright, we're showing 7 ohms, and we've got no output. And I jack up the volume a little bit, and I can barely hear it, but we've got no output. So I had to desolder the voice coil here at the leads to take that apart. And sure enough, when I open this up, I lift this up, and here's the diaphragm, and it's just completely and totally loose. Now this glue is where the voice coil wires come across the top of this flange. So I lift this up, and it's Alright, where's the voice coil? Well, I can see the voice coil wires here, and in fact they're like this. You can see how they terminate. It's upside down. It's like this, and the coil is down in there, way down in the bottom of the gap. I just carefully detach these leads here, and I use them to lift the coil out, and I'm able to get the coil out intact. The coil's good. It's intact. The glue joint that holds this assembly together, the voice coil form, fits into this groove here in the diaphragm, and it's glued in place. This glue joint has failed to the point where you can't see any leftover, any remnant of the glue on the form or the diaphragm. Now I'm going to try, haven't decided yet which adhesive I'm going to use. I'm going to try to re-glue this and get it in perfect alignment, and then I'll have to feed the voice coil wire carefully across here, and then after I put the assembly back together, I have to feed that voice coil wire through the terminal. Incredible. Anyway, we'll after we make the attempt, we'll get back and finish this little video and show you if we were successful or not. Alright, the first thing we had to do was get the voice coil reattached to the diaphragm securely. So I decided to use epoxy, and there's really no way to apply the epoxy with any accuracy to the edge of the form or to the diaphragm and then have them come together without just making a big mess. So what I did was I spread the epoxy out over a sheet of plastic, and I took the voice coil form and I rotated it and dipped it into the epoxy so that it just got a real thin bead right on the very edge. And then I used this spool of tape here because it's the right diameter to let the diaphragm set in there. And then I took the voice coil form with the epoxy on it, and I fit it right into that groove, and I made sure that it fit down in there precisely, and then I put a light flat weight on it and let the epoxy set up. Then once the epoxy set up, we took our white glue and we ran a bead along the leading edge here on the inside, and then we brush that back up. You know, we can't get it up onto the form where it goes in the gap. It'll be too thick. You might be able to see this on camera, but well, it's not the prettiest job we've ever done, but with the rigid epoxy and then the flexible white glue, it should be able to handle just about any kind of vibration that it gets onto. So now what we've got here is the motor, and you have to make sure this flange here hasn't come unglued. And of course, as always, when you're working with a magnetic gap, you have to look down in there and make sure that you've got no tiny pieces of metal. Ferrous metal is going to go down in there. That's where the flux is. And there was a couple of pieces of metal which we removed with tape. Now notice the outside of the flange has these little protrusions here that match up with these slots here on the inside of the frame, and we've cleared this out of solder because after we get the voice coil assembly lined up in the gap, then we're going to have to hopefully be able to get these leads soldered back in through here with basically no room at all to work with. This is going to be really difficult. Also, there was enough glue residue left on the diaphragm itself where I could see where the leads, where the voice coil wire itself had actually come out there. And also, I set the flange on where it fits, and then I noted the space directly between the terminals, and I made a mark there on the flange. because we have to get this set right there. Otherwise, our little bit of coil wire here is not going to be long enough to get back out to the terminal. So what we're going to do is use the white glue again. The reason I'm going to use the white glue this time, and for all you folks that's never done anything like this before, whenever you're reinstalling a diaphragm or a recone kit, if you can, put the parts in dry so that you can see if they fit and are there any other issues that you need to take into account before you put any glue down, because once you put that glue down, you're either not going to be able to get it back up, or you're just going to make a really big mess doing it. So we've already done this, and we think we can get all these parts back together. So we're going to use the white glue because it has a long open time, and we might need to slide this thing around to get it lined up. We don't have any way to shim it. There's no positive flange here that we can use. So we're just going to go with the white glue because it won't tack up. It's got low tack characteristics and a long open time. So it should stay out of our way and not cause us any problems. I don't think I've got any here that's close enough to the gap to worry about. Right there, as you see how it's real close to the gap, so when we lay the flange down on there, we don't want to push any of that over into the gap. So we'll go all the way around and make sure that we don't have any too close to that gap. We don't want it to spill over and go down into that gap. So, bearing in mind that my mark to center the terminals, I'm going to keep that right in between. I'm going to drop that down on the gap. I got to adjust it a little bit here. Rotate. That should be about. And then we'll just work it in a little bit. It won't. You can't push down much because of the dome underneath. And then of course we want to work this flange down into that glue. I can see now I've misplaced my adhesive here, so all I've done here is get it onto that first half roll. So I've just done what I told you not to do, but it's another reason why I use the white glue, just in case I had to make an adjustment. I think what I'll do, so I don't make that mistake again, actually let me just redo this here. But give me a break. I've never done this before either, at least not on this particular device, but I miscalculated the landing, so I cleaned that off, and now we're going to put it where it belongs, because that first half roll of the suspension didn't even really come in contact with the adhesive. Alright, so that's good. Well, let's try again. I'm going to keep my centering mark. Rotate that a bit. It should be about where we want it. So I'm just going to hold down on this dome here and just kind of push it around as I go around. Maybe I'll use something like this. Okay. You can't really feel by manually moving this, and there's, like I say, there's no way to shim it, no way to line it. So we're going to go with our with our generator here, and this force coil wire is so delicate that I don't want to take a chance on these leads being ripped out of there. So I think what I'll do is just tape that down there. Looks like a short, doesn't it? Okay, we can't have that. Let's put all this here where we can. This is delicate work, and I have to be real careful here that I don't break that wire. Okay, now our generator's set at, it's at 400, 436, so let's give her a go. It's lined, it's not rubbing, it's lined up and it's functional. We're going to let that glue set, then we're going to have to drop the flange down on it. And when we get the tricky, and the flange has these locking tabs that grab a hold of this edge. The difficult part is once we get all that together and we turn it over, and we've got very little room to get the coil wire out to these terminals. And if in that process I break those coil wires, then this attempt is going to fail, and the time will go down the drain along with the device. But let's let this glue set, and then we'll come back. Flange back on. Got that lucky on the delicate soldering job. We were able to get the coil wire through there and soldered. 7 ohms on the meter. There's 400 hertz. Sounds like a mid-range to me. We'll let the glue dry and do a full power test on it, see what happens.